The Dreaming Jewels by Theodore Sturgeon is a beautiful little Golance SF novel that I picked up in the UK, and I actually read it in the UK as well. It was the last book I started while I was there, and I completed it I want to say on the flight to Shanghai, could have been. It was early on might have been in Brighton. I was definitely reading this on Brighton Beach. And I do believe this is one that I got from Dorset Bob because it is in excellent condition. It was in better condition before I dragged it around in my backpack reading it, but that's neither here nor there. Still in really good condition. And I was really excited to find this because Theodore Sturgeon is an author I really enjoy. Hard to find in the wild, hard to find in general, nearly impossible to find in Australia, and mostly wrote short stories. So The Dreaming Jewels was apparently his debut novel, and when I bought this I wasn't aware that I actually already had one. I have, bear with me, this really old copy that would be in beautiful condition if someone hadn't used whiteout to reinforce the title and the name, which is quite disgusting and no one should do that sort of thing to a book. I also didn't remember that I'd read it. I read it 2012 and enjoyed it and reviewed it, but that's a while ago and I had forgotten. So I reread this with great enjoyment. The Dreaming Jewels is very much Theodore Sturgeon in his more than human phase. He was interested in humanity and the options available to humanity, and that comes through in The Dreaming Jewels a lot. So we start off with our main protagonist, who is a small boy. And the beginning is a complete hook. I hadn't particularly planned to read this book, but I was going through my haul and I was enjoying myself, picked it up, read a few lines, then I read the paragraph, then I read the first page, and it was clear I wasn't going anywhere. They caught the kid doing something disgusting out under the bleachers at the high school stadium, and he was sent home from the grammar school across the street. He was 8 years old then. He'd been doing it for years. And so that's a hook. What is something disgusting that an 8-year-old does at school that he's been doing for years and gets him sent home? And for the first few pages, we don't really know. If you've read this book or if you've heard about this book, you know that it's not what Theodore Sturgeon is kind of hooking you into thinking. It's something else and something weird. Now, when our protagonist, the 8-year-old Horty, gets home, we find out that his home isn't really his home. He's a foundling. He's been adopted by these two pretty horrible people who do pretty horrible things to him. They're embarrassed at the fact that he's done this thing, and we later find out that the guy who's adopted him mainly adopted him because he thought that would look good on his record when he was running for mayor, was it? He was running for something, an election, and he thought that by adopting a foundling it would look good to him. So Armand Bluet is the name of this not very nice human being. His wife isn't very nice either, but Armand's the main not nice, the bad guy, if you will. And he's very unpleasant to Horty. He sends him up to his room, and in Theodore Sturgeon's inimitable way, we slowly unravel the different levels of unpleasant that Horty's been living under. For example, we find out in an aside of a sentence that there's no door to his room because Armand Bluet believes that children shouldn't be allowed to have privacy. We find out that he has nothing very much except this one toy called Junkie. Junkie is a crude punch type puppet Jack-in-the-Box, and Horty is very attached to him. He has to remain near him at all times, and all we hear is it is kind of crude. He had it with him in the orphanage, and it's been with him ever since. There's these two bright jewels for eyes. And we also keep getting these hints of something weird, like who Horty's parents really are. There's a throwaway comment in the early part of the novel, but if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. So, at this point, Horty goes upstairs. He's been thrown out of school. He's been abused by people at school. He's been abused by his so-called caregivers. He goes upstairs and he reaches for this puppet that is his only real possession that he's had his whole life. When he gets it down, he puts it on the table and he starts talking to it. And that's when Armand Bluet sneaks up the stairs, listens to what he's saying, and comes in to do him a bit more damage. First of all, he smashes the puppet. He throws it on the floor and steps on it and flattens it. And to his surprise and unexpected horror, the result is that Horty launches at him and attacks him. So he throws him to the cupboard, shuts the door, in the process severing 3 fingers off Horty's little left hand. It's all quite dramatic, quite traumatic. It's completely engaging. And it's got that humanist aspect that Theodore Sturgeon does too so well. So you've got this bad guy doing horrible things, but it's a rounded bad guy that we understand. We don't like him, we don't agree with him, but it feels like a real person, not just a cardboard cutout, like many bad guys are inclined to do. So at this point, Horty runs away. What any sensible kid under the circumstances would do, taking Junkie or the fragments of Junkie and not much else, and he leaves town and he ends up in a carnival, because he's picked up by the little people who are part of the freak show, and they kind of adopt him and bring him into the fold. And a large portion of the rest of the book is him living in this carnival and the way of it. So Horty is introduced to the master of the carnival as the sister of another one of the midgets, Z. I think it's Z. Yeah, Z is what they call her. Horty looks a lot like Z, and they sell him as another girl midget who's Z's half sister, and he finds a place in the carnival as a she. Z takes on his rearing, his education in the form of reading him all the books she can find, and is very, very protective of Horty, and we know that there's a reason for that. We don't quite know what it is. We know that the main carnival guy, the guy who runs the carnival, there's something odd and dangerous about him as well. We don't really know what it is. So Z, her full circus name is Xena, and she sells Horty as Kiddo, and Horty is perfectly happy there for many years. The man-eater, that's the handle that's given to the guy who runs the circuit. He's trained as a surgeon, so he fixes Horty's hand, Kiddo's hand, and we start finding the unraveling weirdness of the dreaming jewels, what they are, how they are linked to Horty, now Kiddo, and how they are linked to Man-Eater, who runs the freak show. Where exactly Xena comes into this, we don't find out until right at the end. So I don't think it's I don't really want to spoil this too much, because I'd forgotten the plot almost entirely, and reading it was excellent. I think reading this book without knowing too much about it is the best way to go with it. Because it takes place in the carnival a lot, it'll remind a lot of people of some of Ray Bradbury's work, and me it reminded very strongly of Tom Reamy's work. What's the name of that book? Should have got it out first, can't remember. Taking place in the carnival. Carnival is an excellent place to be both benign, out of the world, and malignant at the same time. Especially, it's a good hiding place for someone like Man-Eater, and some of those freaks. How did they get there? What exactly are they? That's the whole story behind the book. Now, at one point, we find out Xena kicks Horty out of the circus when she is about 19, still a midget, tells him they've got to go out into the real world and find a place. And they do. And that's when the two characters from the early part of the book come in. That's Armand Bluet, for whom Xena has encouraged Kiddo to have the sense that revenge must come one day. And the other person is Kay Willett? Kay something or other, who was the only person at his school who was actually kind to Horty. Now, I really love this book in its entirety. I have, after having read it, I went online and I checked up some of the reviews. It seems to me that the other people who've read it go from a 4 to 5 star experience to a 1 to 2 star experience. Some people really hated it. Some people are calling it a young adult. I mean, the main protagonist is young, but I think there's no excuse to call this a young adult. I think this is probably a bit harsh even for adults in places. And the concepts include science in a way that I really enjoyed. Now, this was first written a long time ago, and the bioscience has changed. So this is copyright to Theodore Sturgeon in 1950. As I said, it's his debut novel. We've got parts where they talk about genetic inheritance, so they don't call it that exactly, and about DNA and how it works, and how nobody knows how DNA works, or inheritance works, I think, rather. I don't think they use the phrase DNA. Now, DNA was discovered rather late, as we think of the timeline. Watson and Crick got a Nobel Prize for it in 1953, so for describing the DNA double helix in 1953, so that was just a few years after this was published. In this book, he talks about how we don't know about inheritance and how information has stop-starts. These days, of course, we do know the codons that are stop codons and start codons in inheritance. However, the way it's used here hasn't really dated, even though the scientific information we've got has updated. I think it worked really well. I have noticed that some younger readers don't like it because it's wrong in that we do know the things that they're claiming here not to know. I don't have a problem with that. A few other critics of this say that the end is disjointed. I also didn't find that this ending is written in a different style, a different way to the rest of the book, but despite the fact that it's stylistically different, I actually thought that the ending was really good. It wrapped things up. There was a tiny bit of a Deus Ex Machina involved there, but I didn't think it was too bad. I was actually as fascinated, enraptured, and riveted to the page by the ending as I was by the beginning. I really enjoyed the descriptions of circus life that made up the bulk of the midsection, and I really enjoyed, as always, Theodore Sturgeon's approach to humanity. Humans are essentially the core of his novel, the core of your reading experience, the interesting thing about his books and stories, and I really loved them in The Dreaming Jewels. So I would thoroughly recommend it. We've got on the cover here, Kurt Vonnegut claims he's a master storyteller. I would agree. I now have 2 copies of The Dreaming Jewels, and I'm keeping both of them for now. Thank you very much for watching this review, and read good books, maybe even read some Theodore Sturgeon, because it's going to be good.